Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Moni Dojeiji. And on tonight's topic, we are going to explore the topic of how to be a socially responsible investor. Research shows that more and more Canadians are putting their money into companies and into mutual funds that represent their values. But that brings up the question of, can you actually invest in this way and still make a healthy return? Is there a way that you can merge or marry consciousness and wealth? My guests tonight are here to explore this topic with us and give us some insights on how we can do just that. Tonight with me are Daniel Roy and Daniel I messed it up. I'm so sorry, Daniel. You're Sonkodi. Daniel Sonkodi. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Dan Roy is a certified financial planner and a certified retirement coach with over 29 years of practice in this field. He is also a principal at Praxis Wealth Management. Welcome, Dan. Yep. And Daniel Sonkodi is also a certified financial planner and a master financial advisor at One Life Wealth Management, where he has a special focus on estate planning to preserve your legacy. You're also a professor at, yes, I understand, at Algonquin College, where for the last 10 years you have actually been teaching the certified financial planning course there. Is that right?
Exactly right.
Okay, well, welcome to the show, both of you. And well, let's start by you telling me a little bit about yourselves. Tell me, let's start with you. Dan, what is it that got you started in this world, in this business of wealth management and socially responsible investing?
Well, 29 years ago, I was fresh out of university and needed something to do, so I thought, well, maybe being a financial planner would be something exciting, and it is. And you know, 29 years later, I can now look back. I'm one of the old timers in the industry now, and I look back, and it's been a great ride. You know, helping clients achieve their financial goals, and whatever that means. It's a broad definition, but you know, sitting down face to face with them and having the pleasure of announcing to them at some point in this whole journey that we're on together that, you know what, you've amassed enough capital here that you can effectively retire, or you can buy your house, or you can do whatever it is that you wanted to achieve. You know, it's there.
Yes.
Now that's fulfilling.
I can imagine. That would be a very satisfying feeling. Yes,
it is definitely fulfilling.
And how about you, Daniel? What got you started? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, years ago, I came to the realization that through my studies, I studied psychology, neuroscience in specific, but realized that laboratory work was not going to work for me.
No.
I enjoyed being around people too much, and definitely the urge was there to try and make a difference. So in any capacity that I worked, whether it was customer service or later in sales, I got led onto this path because there was a great ability to impact other people's lives, and what appeared to be a great time doing it as well.
Yeah.
So when you put it all together, it's turned out to be a great career. I'm in my 17th year right now. Teaching. Still young.
Oh, you're both still young, gentlemen. I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Yeah, and when I started teaching, that was the big thing also.
Sure.
So early on in my career, I had some great people help me along my path, accelerate my progress, and there too, giving back and hopefully making a difference for some of the new financial professionals coming online, helping them with their CFP program, and hopefully there'll be planners with a higher conscience rather than just a transaction-oriented financial advisor.
Well, you know, that's a very interesting point that you bring up, because consciousness is one of those topics that I definitely want to weave into this conversation today, especially when it comes, obviously, because we're talking about socially responsible investing. Now, for those viewers out there who have never heard of this before, can you tell me a little bit more about what is a socially responsible investor? What does that mean? Who is this person?
Okay, so the investor would be somebody who would want to invest his money based on a certain criteria that he feels, his values that he has inside of him. So he or she would look at an investment platform that would correspond to their value system. It's not 100% doable because then you're getting into the inclusion and exclusion discussion. But you know, for the most part, with some limitations, it is absolutely possible for somebody to align their values, their value system, with their investment objectives. Absolutely doable, 100%.
And is there a certain profile for this kind of an investor? Is it a certain age that you find that it attracts, or is it across the board?
Okay, so if you were asking us this question 30 years ago, I would say you'd be looking at a baby boomer, a hippie in Birkenstocks and tie-dye T-shirts, you know, and singing Kumbaya all the time. That's the old stereotype. Today, people in business suits, people that are on a career path, that work in various industries, that are attracted to socially responsible investing, because, you know, it's part of the consciousness shift that's been taking place. Yes. Not only in Canada, North America, but around the world, where people are wanting to align their values with their, not only their spending habits, but also how they're going to invest their money. So, you know, can you spot them in a crowd? No, you can't.
Interesting.
They're all age groups,
yeah.
Young, old, they're everywhere.
Yeah. And has that been your experience as well? Is that what you're
my
finding?
Experience more recently is that younger people are a lot more aware. So even when you look at trends that are going on today,
yes.
A lot of business owners, they're telling me it's harder and harder to hire people versus the old way or the old traditional model, because a lot of kids today don't have the same aspirations as they did 20, 30 years ago. For example, the independence or the freedom, the symbol of freedom that a car once demonstrated, a lot of kids today are not really interested in having a car. They're more interested in other forms of transportation that are more environmentally sound, things like this. Okay. So I find there's a lot of perhaps children of clients where this awareness is definitely, it's growing at a rate that even surpasses the older school generation. Sure. So it is an interesting dynamic that way.
And so are there certain kinds of investments then that are considered socially responsible investments? Or, because I've heard terms like ethical funds, green funds. Are we talking about this kind of investing, like these kinds of funds in general, mutual funds?
They're all the same.
They're all the same.
So whatever you want, whatever label you want to put on them, at the end of the day, they all do the same thing. Okay. And what they're going to do is to so the portfolio manager who's hired to manage that pool of capital is going to be there, and he's going to have a list of exclusion items, that companies, sectors that he cannot invest in, and he's going to have other companies that and sectors that he's going to be able to invest in. So it's an inclusion process or an exclusion process. Okay. So typically what they're going to be excluding are defense, companies that focus 100% of their business exercise in manufacturing defense, military hardware.
Right.
Brings a good question. You know, you look at the company called Coleman, who makes the Coleman lantern and the Coleman stove.
Oh yeah, the camping stuff. Yes, exactly.
Well,
yes.
You know, you look at the inventory of what the soldiers carry today, and Coleman is one of their suppliers. So is Coleman a defense manufacturer? Yeah. You know, there's the gray zone. Another thing they're going to absolutely exclude is tobacco. And the research has proven time and time again that it doesn't matter if you take a smidgen or a large amount of tobacco, it ain't good for you. Right. You know, so that's excluded. Okay. And then there's nuclear that they would typically exclude out of that. Not all of nuclear, but you know, some components of the nuclear. Some fund managers will exclude like gambling, the sin stocks, alcohol, tobacco, like you said, yes. So you know, you can finesse this thing ad infinitum, but generally defense, tobacco, nuclear are going to be the things that are going to be taken right off the table, and then the portfolio manager will start to do his work on constructing a portfolio based on those kinds of items.
Well then, let's just say that you're an investor in Canada, and you are, because many people will say, well, mining, I'm completely against how we mine, whether it's how we take out petroleum or gold or anything else. Yeah. So if you're a Canadian and you want to be Canadian and support Canadian enterprises, that's one big one. And that's a big part of our economy is mining. That's right. How do you advise clients
Energy
who
and
want
resources?
Yeah, exactly.
That's like 2/3 of our stock market capitalization. Exactly. So if you exclude those sectors, you know, you're going to have to look elsewhere in order to complement the financials and some of the consumer discretionary that are going to be left over here in Canada. Okay. So you're going to have a very lopsided portfolio, because you can't invest 100% of your portfolio in financials. It's not prudent.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
it's not prudent investment.
Yes.
It also opens a Pandora's box, because let's say, for example, someone wants to invest in financials. The big question then becomes, banks lend money to petroleum companies, to
Sure.
mining companies, maybe even tobacco farmers. So at what point do you delineate where that responsibility ends or where it begins? Because I think the focus has to be, what is one's objective?
Okay.
And objectives in investing and just rates of return, or what you keep after taxation, inflation, and so on, those are very important items. But when you think about also, if there's a social responsibility, or you feel that there's something that in this world today is not in alignment with your value system, if you go deep enough, the question is, how deep do you go to see whether a company that you want to invest in, because you do want to participate in the profits and rates of return, at what stage do you draw the line and maybe turn a blind eye to that and say, you know what, this does cross the line because they are funding research, whether it's the type of things that are harmful to the environment, or maybe to laboratory animals, or any number of things.
Yeah.
So really you're getting into a cascading effect that could really spark a lot of controversy.
Well, it's almost forcing the individual as an investor to really reflect on what they believe and how far they are willing to go in their investments to really live what they believe. And there is no easy answer to that, obviously, because you might say, well, okay, I'll invest in a bank, as you mentioned, just to use your example, and I'm willing to perhaps overlook the fact that they lend money to tobacco farmers, or they lend money to big pharma, or whatever it is. It's a very hard, it's not a clear cut, there's not a clear cut answer for an investor.
There's a lot of gray zones.
There's no grays.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So what I ask clients to do is, when they're looking for an SRI overlay on their portfolio.
And what does that mean, like an SRI overlay? What do you mean by that?
So we're both financial planners, and we go through the same established process of identifying the client goals, looking at their objectives, analyzing their data, crunching all the numbers together and saying, okay, this is the game plan that we have devised for you to go from today to where you need to go in 15, 20, 30 years down the road. There's going to be an investment component to that exercise. So that's when the SRI overlay will come into play, and we will say, okay, in order to achieve our objectives, you need to have a portfolio that's going to be 30% in fixed income and 70% in stocks. All right. On top of that, we're going to look at developing an SRI overlay to make sure that the client's values are being represented within the portfolio. So excluding defense stocks, tobacco, all of the things that they don't want to have in their portfolio. Is it doable at 100%? No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not.
Is that kind of your experience as well when you're dealing with potential clients? Do you go through the same kind of exercise?
It is, yeah. Because I mean, I'd liken it almost to planning a vacation.
Okay.
When you think about it, you know what time you have to be at the airport. You know what flight leaves to your destination of choice. But even there, when you know what your itinerary is, you still have choice with your travel agent, or if you're booking online, which airline are you going to fly? Do you go with a discount airline? Do you go with a very high end? Or are you going economy, first class? And what drives that? Is it something that you like the company, whether it's a WestJet or an Air Canada or something like that, or a discount airline, whatever it might be. So there's always choice in the final analysis to help you get to that destination. And it's very much the same in the planning world. So it has to be an appropriate vehicle. Now, an appropriate vehicle has to get you there, but the way in which it gets you there is also important. So does that align, if it's an SRI overlay, does that align with your value system so that you're comfortable with the types of investments and how you're generating those returns?
And the next step after that is when you're doing investment management, you have to look at how the portfolio manager behaves in real time. So, if he's taking on a lot of risk, a lot of unnecessary risk to get from point A to point B, maybe that is not suitable for that specific client. So you have to really get into the weeds to really understand, when you're doing the investment management aspect of where a client needs to go, is to make sure that the vehicle of choice is going to get them there in the comfort level that they want to be in. So that's the risk management component. So there's always a risk element in every decision that you're going to make. And if it's impossible to get the client from point A to point B using SRI platforms, then it behooves us to tell them, okay, it's not doable, but what's a solution? How do we go about to respond to your values so that we can get there from in a most logical way possible?
Yeah.
And I would further say that there are some portfolio managers out there that run active money
Yes.
that just by the process of their company selection make them SRI eligible without being SRI labeled. So they exclude a lot of things. They don't invest in resource companies because the driving force behind a resource company will be the price of the commodity. The commodity price is all over the place.
Okay.
And if you want to have a stable company that produces goods and services, that has a predictable cash flow, then you need to be out of a commodity that inherently is extremely volatile. So, you know, you have to put all of those factors in together and say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Client, this is the reality. Can we achieve those objectives for you by using SRI funds? If it's doable, then yes, let's go ahead and do that. But if it's not doable, then we're on plan B.
Okay, so then SRI has, if I'm understanding you correctly, is then there is the strategic or the planning and the goal aspect of it, and then there is the piece that is the mutual funds, the actual what are you going to invest in, that is what you're calling the SRI overlay, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And so what kinds of, are there a lot of these kinds of funds available out there for investors to choose from? I would imagine, where would they find out? I mean, let's just say that I'm interested. Where do I go? Can you answer that one, Daniel?
I would say go to Google first.
Go to Google.
If you're not going to go, if you don't have a financial planner working for you, it's a great place to get started and get read up a little bit.
What do you say? SRI?
Yep, socially responsible
Social
investing.
responsible
Or the other moniker,
Environmentally.
which is ESG, environmental, social, governance, investing.
Well, hold that thought for a second.
Yeah.
I'll let you finish yours, and then I'll have you explain the ESG. Go ahead. Okay. So Google first.
Yeah, Google first, just to get a little bit of background, because there are some companies that specialize in this type of an investment. But I think most importantly, what I'd have to say, even as you start down that path, whether it's on your own or whether with a financial professional, one thing that's very important in the financial planning world, in investment selection, to separate emotion from logic. Because consistency over time guarantees wealth. It's a numbers game. It's all about consistency over time. And what we have to do is really divorce ourselves from the emotion. Otherwise, you get what happens in the stock market en masse when the 11 o'clock news reports horrible data, whether it's from across the world or, you know, down the street. And people get very emotional about that. That results in massive sell-offs. Of course, when they realize that the sky is not falling, usually things start to spike back up. Now, I'm overly simplifying this, but in general, it's very important, because even if you're looking at SRI investing, no matter how responsible you want to be, you have to separate the emotion from the logic and focus on the numbers that will get you there. And it's very important to not just buy into a story, because there's some very, very interesting corporate spin on, you know, any number of companies, whether it's renewable technology, resources, etc. But a great story does not mean a profitable company or a sustainable long-term business model. So if you're very focused on buying into that and the emotion is gripping you, chances are, it's been proven in many, many psychological studies, where emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. So we get to make potentially some very costly mistakes, and what we have to focus on is how to make profitable outcomes.
Okay,
so there's that balance that still has to exist between the two.
Okay, I want to continue that line of thinking in just a moment. We do have to go to break, so please stay tuned, and when we come back from break, we'll continue our conversation on how to marry wealth with consciousness. Thanks so much.